Hi, my name is Robin, and today I want to talk about how we, Wikipedians, can preserve trans art and artists. As I mentioned, my name is Robin, username Robin is adorable. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a trans woman, and I am a lesbian. And today I want to talk about trans art and artists mainly because it's really important to me, and I think it's a really important thing to do at this time in history, given that we are under attack from many different sides. I believe that preservation work can counter different forms of this repression, and I believe that Wikipedia is in a unique position to help this situation. And us Wikipedians can continue this work in preserving trans art. So, as I mentioned, things are not great for trans people, queer people, and lots of other different types of people. It has historically been like this, it is currently like this, and it will likely continue to be like this for some time. So, for example, these are just a few headlines that I grabbed from recent events, both within the US and outside of the US. And it's important to counter this repression, right? Because we end up facing a lot because of it. We face violence and harassment. We face denial of basic needs, denial of healthcare. We face discrimination and prejudice. We face situations where we may not have civil or human rights, or we're facing the loss of those civil and human rights. And within the domain of Wikipedia, right, we face erasure, right? We face us not being included, not being mentioned, being denied our existence. We face misinformation where facts are distorted or misrepresented, right? Whether that's unintentionally or intentionally in the form of disinformation, right? For political or propaganda reasons. And given all of this that we're facing, what are we to do? So I would argue that one way to counter repression is to counter it with preservation. And I would argue today that I think art preservation and preservation of the artists that make that art is incredibly important, right? Otherwise, these people and their works would be forgotten, distorted, or eliminated, right, from the record. This is crucial because there are a lot of narratives right now that claim that trans people are a fad. We're a new thing. We're not a legitimate category of person. But to archive and preserve art and artists not only shows that we've always been around, are around, and will continue to be around, but it also shows that we're human, right? A lot of people medicalize trans people and reduce us down to just surgeries and medications, when actually we're whole human beings with thoughts and feelings and emotions and opinions. And like other human beings, we like to express these things. And we tend to express these things through art and different kinds of art. This is really important to me because a lot of forms of art, right, transcend language, right? This can be shared and spread throughout the world in different cultures. It can be spread across time, and it can be spread even if our words change and our concepts of gender or sexuality change, right? We'll still have that art, and we can still seek to understand or at least experience, these different forms of being a human. And ultimately, this is all to say, right, these archives and this preservation work is important um, because it fully completes knowledge. It adds to our education of trans people and to subject matters that we have less information about and have not been the focus. And ultimately, I hope this can lead to positive change. And when I talk about art and artists, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the works people make and the people themselves. And this would include things like literature, physical media like sculptures or murals, performance art such as like film and television and theater, and one of my favorites, music. There's also a question of how hard we should be categorizing and archiving art that depicts trans people by cis people. I think that's important, and I think that's also crucial work. But I think that's something we should talk about, but not right now. So given this, I wanted to know, right, how is Wikipedia at archiving and preserving art and artists. And one way to kind of like get a measure at this was I did a very basic Wikidata query search looking at, as an example, of the number of trans and cis musicians for which we have sex or gender information. And if you look at this table, we see that, right, there's a lot of cis people. That's not unexpected. But we only have like about 0.2% of all of these results are trans people. And even if we consider trans people a lower estimate of the population, like 0.5%, 1%, that's still a pretty large underestimation. We're missing a lot of records. We're missing a lot of people, right? Which means we're missing a lot of art. And that means we have a lot of work to do. And so what kind of work can we do? So one thing we can do is look at the different wiki domains, right? For example, in Wikidata, we can be creating entries for artists. We can be editing these entries to reflect more accurate and complete information. We can use Wiki Commons to document and make records of different art, different exhibitions, different performances. Like, for example, this category of images from a trans music festival that was held earlier this year in Washington, D.C. called Liberation Weekend that features different trans artists and their allies performing. And finally, of course, we have Wikipedia, where people can edit articles, create articles, update articles with more accurate information, both on the artists and their art. So all of this can be done as an individual, right? But I believe we can do a lot together. And I think we have a lot of potential really cool collaborations with other wiki projects and groups. So for example, like Wiki Art Plus Feminism and Wiki Biography, Wiki Personal Pronouns, and there are much more, I imagine, that we could partner with. We can also collaborate with different non-wiki archives and organizations. So there is this tradition of queer archives, both physical and digital, for example, like Digital Transgender Archive, that I think would be a really great collaboration to have. There's already really incredible work being done, for example, at the LGBTDB or database with Claire Cronk, which I think is an amazing project that I think we should all be contributing to. But ultimately, it's to think about, like there's a lot of different organizations and projects. Think creatively, right? Trans people are everywhere. Trans people can apply to lots of these different things. With that all being said, there are some important considerations, right? When doing this work, there's always risk and danger, right, in potentially outing someone or making their trans status more easily accessible, especially if we're looking at countries where being trans is outlawed or even more dangerous than other places. We know that these records may be inaccurate with outdated language, with dead names, and that's something to consider. Also, especially when we're talking about trans people, where information can be dynamic and changes over time. We know there are biases in information, biases in preservation, right, and what gets recorded and what doesn't. And this is especially critical when we think about context, right? I am speaking from North America. I'm white in the year 2025, which is a very different historical and cultural context, say, from someone who may have lived in Southeast Asia in the 17th century. So it's to be mindful of terms and what we call each other and how history is recorded. And finally, right, it's important to consider that this work being done, right, by trans people, by queer people, is a big investment, right? It's an investment in time, in energy, in mental health even. And I'd say we need to invest more in our community and have allies, help us in this work because it's not easy, right? But ultimately, what I'm trying to say here today is that we can work together, right? We can work together both within Wiki and outside Wiki to preserve trans culture, preserve trans art. And to do this, right, we can counter erasure. We can counter this type of repression we see and ultimately share with the world who we are, right, both accurately and completely. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to humanity to do this. So that's all I have to say today. Thank you so much to Queering Wikipedia 2025, Wikimedia LGBT+, Vic, and of course, everyone who's watching this. If you want to help in preserving and archiving trans art, please look at my user talk page, send me a message. would love to work together on this. Okay, thanks. Bye.